So I apologize if I have not been as attentive with some of you folks as I may have been, in the past. So I just want to apologize in advance. There's going to be a long period of road travel coming up. I am hoping to take this on the road with me. I'm going to be around some really incredible people. So I guess it would be kind of cool to explain to you what's been going on. So this weekend, I'll be traveling to New York, and I will actually be visiting with a friend of mine afterwards, in order to do some work with the Horizon Psychedelics Conference. And so I'm going to go there and learn a bunch about the science of a bunch of things that I don't know a whole lot about, at least not from a science perspective. Um, And then the following week, almost immediately after, I mean, I get back. I have one day to, do laundry, get my house situated, and pack, and then I'm actually heading out to Harvest Festival, and that's a really exciting opportunity. I'm going to get to do a couple of things there. I'm going to be speaking, so I'm going to be able to talk with some folks, many folks, about this and about other things that I'm doing. Um, and certainly, I want to keep getting more and more folks plugged in and connected and supported, and feeling like they can be empowered to pursue their own recovery as a cannabis patient. Um, and so, talking about different things that are kind of coming up or coming around the bend and certain rights issues that are prevalent. There's a lot of things going on right now in our political world. And I think it's important every now and again that we're all mindful and that we're talking about the things that are going on that affect our ability to, have these rights and to be able to live the lifestyle of our choosing that self-directed and the self-direction is supportive of healthy recovery. So it's really important to understand how this segues into like our pursuit of recovery in this way. Um, and there are other rights issues underneath all of that. And part of what I'm going to be going there to talk with them about, and part of what I'm going to spend some of tonight talking with you folks about, is how our recoveries don't just start and end with ourselves. As a species, um, humans, like we are all humans as creatures, have been very social, and a part of how we thrive and how we do well, and a big part of what a lot of the dominant philosophies of recovery are about, seeking community, seeking those relationships, those mutually supportive relationships, being able to identify with another person, these really, very basic but deeply profound interpersonal linkages that support healthy recovery. And part of that is acknowledgement of our inherent traits as a creature. Um, and so, it's really important to be mindful of that. So at Harvest Fest, I have the opportunity to not only speak on the main stage, but to be able to run a sound stage and perform some of my music for folks, and to also run a couple of workshops. And in those workshops, there's two things that I'm really interested in talking about. One is to introduce people to the concept of harm reduction and go over some of the fundamentals, and to work with folks on a basic understanding of these ideas within the festival community, try to kind of get everybody in the same place, and have some space to talk about these ideas. And then the second workshop I'm really excited about. And so this is one that I've worked really hard on. I've had a lot of experience doing community organizing and political activism. Um, some of you folks that know me know that I wrote a law this year to legalize drug checking services and narcotics testing supplies. And so this has been a huge step forward towards establishing regulatory practices that we know lead to an increase in consumer safety, um, subsequently. So I'm very excited to be bringing this to this group. There's a lot of motivation for people to be politically engaged right now. I'm really excited as we're heading into the November election season. As a little bit more information comes out the pipeline, I am excited to formally announce that I have accepted a role with Marijuana Today to be their event coordinator in Las Vegas in the second week of November. So I'm really excited to see what happens. I can't really release any more details than that, but just that I'll be with some of the brightest and finest in our community, and hopefully I'll be able to broadcast to you all from there. So that's also extremely exciting, and I'm really thrilled for the opportunities. And I truly cannot believe the outpouring of blessings on my life these days. I'm so grateful. It's absolutely amazing. So some of the stuff that's come up this week for me, I had two big events this weekend. One was much more personal to connect with my heritage, which I feel is a very important part of my recovery. And so I was able to attend the local powwow for the Eastern Woodlands tribes, and it was such an incredible experience. I mean, I met, many people who very much like me, are descended from the same, not the same exact people, but from the same people, and to feel comfortable in a lifestyle that makes sense to me. A lot of my struggle, being a person who doesn't identify with the dominant culture, has been, the forced cultural appropriation, which has been very difficult for me, and I have not really been able to successfully assimilate. And so, part of what the medicine does for my soul, it allows me to continue to persist in a way in a world where I genuinely I don't mesh in the majority of that world, that those are not my people. And so this weekend I got to really genuinely feel like I was with my people. I was never so proud. I brought my son, I brought my parents, I had my whole family there. I mean, it was just absolutely spectacular. Um, and then the second event was the Recovery Fest. So there's a group called the Above the Noise Foundation, and they had a Recovery Fest. And it was enormous, enormous. We were talking like stadium, massive stage, and like thousands of people in recovery. And I know for a fact that there were a few others like me there just because I know some things. But there were more than just me there in this kind of recovery. And that really gave me a good reason to smile, because for us to be able to come together as a community, whether or not we have these differences, and have that, and to present in that way, like it was incredible to feel like as a community we were expansive, and that we were strong, and there really aren't other words I could even put to that. The empowerment that I felt, feeling like that not only was I not alone, because I had known that for a long time, but that there was an enormous amount of people that identified like me, and that we could all go enjoy a rock concert together, and that's okay. To me, it felt like we've started to turn the corner on this thing. We've started to understand the disease. We've started to understand the social conditions. We've started to understand the intersections of racism and drug policy. We've started to understand the role of certainly certain drug policies, but also the role of drugs in people coping with domestic violence. And a big part of my documentary is bringing those stories forward to talk about that, because I felt so strongly that if when we were talking about drug policy, if instead of using the word addict, or junkie, or what any of the other numerous negative pejoratives that are very stigmatizing, and we replace it with something that was actually a little bit more factual, if anything, because there is a high level of prevalence rates amongst survivors of domestic violence. And we simply just call people victims of domestic violence. I mean, how different would the landscape of our policy look? would people really be okay with saying, we're going to act this way or we're going to make a decision about this group of people, but we're ignoring the fact that this group of people is also this group of people. And we blatantly ignored it. It's been absent from our narrative. It's been absent from public discourse. It's been absent um, from all of our discussion, except sometimes in the educational and institutional, and sometimes in the more well-educated professional. Um, we encounter this. Folks working at the local Sojourner House, the Women's Domestic Violence Coalition, people that are doing this work. They've encountered much more of this, but because there's so much need for protection for these young women, it becomes really tricky and difficult to really advocate at a high level, because a lot of that data is secured and a lot of that information is protected to protect the victims. And there's a reason why the information is there and we protect it. And yet, somehow, when drugs become a part of the equation, like that is lost. And I don't want to get too sidetracked on the weeds of policy, so I'm going to end with this. It's as simple as this: we require our homeless shelters to rigorously vet a process by which a victim's information is shared because her abuser might find her and either hurt her or kill her or do some other kind of horrible nonsense. I have to wonder how many of the police departments are checking if somebody's a victim fleeing domestic violence before they book them for drugs or alcohol. And my bet, I'd be almost willing to put money on this, that they don't. And then that information, along with that person's address and the date they were arrested and when they're going to court and what they were arrested for, is all getting published publicly. And yet there's no accountability for that because now we're talking about drugs and an addict instead of a victim of domestic violence. This is something that our criminal justice system has created a way for a perpetrator to continue to exert power over their victim and to have access to information about them and to have control over them. And the illicit nature of our society created that. It perpetuates it, it permits it, in fact, it promotes it. A regulatory system, that would not happen because those women would no longer be considered criminals. Their information would not be published, it would be secured, and we could work on focusing on the women's safety, which is what we should be focusing on, not promoting the power of their oppressors. Um, and so I think there are some really, really, really repugnant moral issues underlying a lot of our substance use policy. And I would challenge people to continue to revisit those because these things are happening all around us, and whether we're aware of it or not, we have some responsibility because we've allowed people to become elected and to make laws and to make decisions and to treat the people around us in our community this way, and we've allowed it. If we have not taken an active stance against it, we have allowed it, and there's accountability for that. So those are a lot of the things that I think about, during my time in recovery. Um, One of the things that came out of the Above the Noise Foundation was really just having a recovery out loud, and that's exactly what this is. I mean, they couldn't have hit the nail on the head any more squarely. Having a recovery out loud, having a recovery where I can, share in what I'm going through and what's going on in my life, and to have people I can reach out to and talk to who, may choose to live the same way or maybe not, but I hope I can find a group of people that choose to live this way and talk about what that looks like for me. And sometimes it's not just talking about the most important part about this is you'd think, right, coming into a cannabis assisted recovery meeting or group that there'd be a lot of focus on the cannabis, but the reality is for people in recovery that taking medicine just becomes one kind of matter of factual piece of a comprehensive web that supports us in our recovery. And it isn't just all about one thing. The bottle of berry boost and vitamins that I drink every day is an equally vital part of my recovery. The nice long walks that I take down my building to get exercise, when I need to decompress or when I need to stretch my legs. Or even my buddy Snickers. He's not here right now. He's behaving himself, not putting his butt in front of the camera. But those are all parts of my recovery. My friendships, the entertainment, the concerts, my music. I got to go to my friend Eric's house after the Macklemore concert, so that was at Recovery Fest. Um, and that was probably the biggest highlight of my night because you know what I got to do? I got to sit with a couple of my friends in the backyard around a fire, and I had my gym bag with me. I brought my drum, so I was just kind of playing on my drum, and Joe was jamming on the guitar, and man, it felt good. Just to do something simple like that. Get out of the house, get outside, get with nature. The smell of the wood smoke just does something for me. I've always loved the smell of the wood smoke and just being around some of my people. They even came out and visited the powwow. Boy, talk about an outpouring of support. People who may or may not understand anything at all about my culture. I mean, I certainly hope my parents do, but because of the respect and the mutuality and the love, and God bless what him and his family have gone through. Boy, they've had it rough, and they still get up every day and they face every day with their head up and they do what they can with what they got, and I'm proud to call them my friends. They've always been there for me. Those are the people that I have in my life today. The people in my life were not always like that. When I was out there, it was tough to find people that were genuine. Um, and and some of those people I met while I was out there. In fact, the family I was visiting, I met while I was out there. And now I'm over here and I'm still over there, and there's really not this big degree of separation. I realized at a certain point that I just needed to make different lifestyle decisions, and it took me a while to separate from the patterns of behavior that kept me where I was. But once I was able to do that, um, and that took a process. And yeah, I can explain what some of those are, and those may or may not be the right ones for you, but they're just the ones I use. Um, and and so you can, do something with that or not, you know. But the point being is that, when you're appropriately utilizing a medication, just like any other medicine, it's not like the central part of your day. If I was at a place where the cannabis was something that was a central part of my dialogue, my narrative, my time, my space, my day. Like I might question whether or not that's living a balanced lifestyle. Snickers, that's plastic. Down. Come on. There you go. Good boy. Oh, it's amazing when he listens. Oh my gosh, I can't believe he listened. Whew. My cat has a thing for plastic. He's so naughty sometimes. You should not be eating plastic. I have to hide all my plastic, and every time I stick something down, I have to make sure there's no plastic. Oh, yeah, no plastic, mister. So that's kind of the point, right? So like people make a much bigger deal out of it than it needs to be. I definitely think there's some valid criticism going on about the ongoing support and the access to professional consultation around medical cannabis. We can certainly talk about a little bit of some of the science and things that can help inform people's decisions, and I can share a little bit of my wisdom. Particularly strain selection seems to be really important. Just at a very basic knowledge level, there are in the cannabis plant, one of the things that makes it such an effective medication is the high variability and biodiversity of the co-presence of different um, chemical elements, in particular different oils that the plant secretes, it produces naturally, and many of these they crystallize, and they can be kind of moved between states where they can be an oil or they can be crystal, but generally on the plant itself they crystallize, and so some of those are the tetrahydro. Um, oh gosh, I can't remember the last word. Um, I want to say it's tetrahydrochlorine, but hold on. Tetra. This is why we have Google. Tetrahydrocannabinol. So tetrahydrocannabinol is only one of many, many, many ingredients in cannabis plant. It's one of the more well known. It's one of the ones that's been stigmatized the most. But what we actually learned about tetrahydrocannabinol is that it acts as a bit of a carrier and a delivery mechanism to. We actually have an endocannabinoid system that processes different things, and it's pretty closely connected to our positive mood. And so there's a lot of benefits for mood because of the delivery system. But there's also kind of secondary benefits that are not additive, but they're what's the word I'm looking for? Um, they're synergetic. So when I say synergetic, it means that they have interplay. So instead of this chemical in this amount stacking on this chemical in this amount and this chemical in this amount, you would have like a straight number. They multiply, and the degree to which they multiply varies, but it's pretty largely accepted that they multiply. And this is what scientists call the cohort effect. And so when you have a number of different chemicals that are present that have medical benefits, sometimes you can even find that there are cumulative benefits that are significantly more than the separate totals. But then sometimes there's entirely new benefits. And we've only barely scratched the surface on that. And I feel like the hybrids are really going to start to pull away from the rest of the strains, except for specific, like specialty treatment conditions that use specific indicas and specific sativas. I think that as far as creating really incredible daily maintenance supplements, even if it were extracted and put into some other method of consuming, it doesn't have to be a flower. Um, but I feel as though like there are, because of the biodiversity, there's so many medical benefits we barely even looked at. And a lot of that's going to come out when we start to analyze, what happens when you combine this with this with this with this and this and this. Because what we're finding in a lot of plants, you're having sometimes, a dozen or more different chemicals that are found co-present in the same plant that all work together in different ways. Um, some of the more popular ones that people are familiar with, you have CBD. There's also CBA. Um, there's I believe a CBG, and then there's a group of oils that are classified as terpenes. And terpenes are really interesting because they're one of the less talked about features of the cannabis plant. But one of the really interesting things about them is that they're also one of the least controversial elements of the plant. And in fact, you can buy terpenes online in by the bottle and create your own tinctures with them. And so there are significant medical benefits to these terpenes. And so this oftentimes the CBG or the CBD or the CBA or the THC, whether it's THCA or THC, they will sometimes kind of alter the course of what those do a little bit, and they'll move it in a direction, and many times it will multiply the benefits of whatever it is that you're looking for. So it does. There is a reason for keeping the plant in the plant's natural form most of the time. There are some significant benefits for specific extraction like CBD, particularly for folks who are experiencing inflammation. Um, but there are also other terpenes which help with that greatly. And I'm not going to get into like the whole grand list of them, but generally a terpene is an oil that's secreted by a fruit or a plant um, to indicate the presence of a particular nutrient. And what that does is it's actually a way of drawing certain animals, attracting them to consume the plant, because that's how the seeds get spread. So many times, these are seed bearing plants, or it's part of some other type of survival strategy, and and so these plants grow with these nutrients, and they offset natural deficiencies. And so, in some of the time that I spent studying naturopathy in Northern California, one of the things that my teacher was very adamant about was the validity and the importance of being able to fully understand and know how to access and utilize the body's own self-diagnostic tools. She very much believed that we had the ability and the tools, and if, with the proper knowledge, that there was virtually no condition that was incurable or intreatable, um, by just simply being able to rely on a really well-founded knowledge of the body and its responses and sensory systems. Um, and we do. We have a pretty highly advanced um, evolutionary body, and we've survived for millions of years this way. So there's some sense to that, and it made sense to me immediately. It wasn't something I even thought to question. And as I've continued to do, more advocacy, particularly around cannabis, this was an astounding fact for me because, this is what I was taught. This was now squarely in my wheelhouse. And here I am working in a completely unrelated kind of paramedical professional environment, and I'm learning that this is also kind of intrinsically connected to that as well. And so there's no coincidence that, cannabis has proven to be such an effective medication for such a wide range of conditions. And a big reason for this is because of the effect of terpenes. The reason why you experience, a consuming event very differently with a white widow as opposed to a granddaddy perp, right? And so there's certainly some differences in the properties of the THC itself, but also at the same time, a lot of it is driven by the co-prevalence of terpenes, which are going to be inherently different in a white widow versus a granddaddy perp. And so many of those terpenes contribute to a whole range of benefits, and they contribute to the enormous range of smells. I mean, we have marijuana that smells like cheese. We have marijuana that smells like strawberries. We have marijuana that smells like pineapples. We have marijuana that smells like citrus fruit. We have marijuana that smells like pine trees. I can go on and on and on and on. It's unreal, the amount of biodiversity of marijuana. And what's even more astounding than that is that virtually all of those distinctions in scent, and of course, this has been largely our historic um, accessing tool for preference of marijuana, has been scent. And what's been really incredible is to watch how science has actually begun to reinforce that. And so we've kind of come full circle to where, like, the common practice knowledge of the people that have been using this stuff for decades has now converged with the scientific community and is supported by evidence. So it's really fascinating to go kind of back to the chalkboard, and look at where we came from, and where we had to get to finally get back to where we started, except with some rights. And so kind of what the other part of the segment this week that I want to talk with you guys about, and I'm going to continue to talk about this a little bit, and I'm not going to get political, but what I am going to say is that we need to be organized. You know, we have a group of people who have some power that are very interested in seeing our way of life no longer exist, at least not in the way it does now. We have, as a group of people who have worked on rights campaigns for medical cannabis across the country. I've experienced what life was like before and what life has been like after, and I can tell you, I feel so terrible for the parts of the country that aren't enjoying these liberties right now. Um, just wait, they're coming your way. But we need to be vigilant. We need to be involved. We need to be working together. We need to be sharing our stories. We need to be telling people about our positive experiences. We need to be willing to share with people and show them that life as a cannabis patient isn't really that different than any other patient, because at the end of the day, when it comes down to living a recovery oriented lifestyle and being a patient, is you're already committed to a lifestyle of moderation and balance. Like that is the entire premise of recovery. And it's not just moderation, like some people believe in abstinence. I don't mean like dedicated moderation in terms of like continued consumption, but what I mean is in all areas of our life, we're called to keep our lives in balance and to be more self-aware and to be more compassionate towards ourselves and really listen to ourselves and to give us space to be and not be so demanding and to not be so cold and to not cave into the pressures of society to be a particular way, because in order for us to stay healthy, we need to take care of ourselves. And people in recovery recognize that. We're committed to that. And we're committed to seeing healthier communities. We're committed to seeing a healthier world. And it makes life better for everybody when we can be this way. So I would really love to see a culture of recovery, spreading beyond the traditional boundaries. We've really kept this thing locked into just people who are directly affected by substance use disorder. And I'm convinced that substance use disorder is not the condition. It's a symptom of a societal sickness that we're feeling much more profoundly with the way that we've been living, the way we've been, demanded to live. You think about how, work has changed for the average American over the past 50 years. We work harder, we work longer, we produce more, we produce better quality. The demands have continued to increase without the rewards. And that's across the board. The entire country is feeling that. When I talk to my parents about how things were, and I compare that to my life today, um, quite easily, I could have owned a house by this age on my salary, and it would have cost me less than the rent that I'm paying on my apartment. And that's the world. That's the reality that many people, not just in Rhode Island but across the country, are living with, or that both parents are having to work full-time jobs and even picking up extra shifts just to be able to have the house with the picket fence and the two children or three children, and to give those children a little bit of something and to put some money away. And we don't have the luxury of parenting our own children for large parts of the day. And so we've really moved away from what has served us so well for millions of years. We've now struggled with. And a big part of what's allowed for at least indigenous societies to survive a need for increased workload or capacity has been an emphasis or a focus on some sense of communal living. And I don't mean this in like the socialist or communistic sense, but just in a more fundamental human social sense, that we build these organic, interdependent relationships from a healthy framework. And a lot of what the recovery mutual aid groups have done have tried to structure in volunteer work and service and being connected and being part of a communal society. People that do things for the sake of doing them, to exchange them with each other because it's the right thing to do and it keeps us healthy as a society. And, as we've learned to take care of each other, I think it's going to very quickly become time for us to become the teachers and to teach everyone else who's also been living this way how we need to start living if we want to all get better. And I think until we do that, we're only treating the people at the most severe end of the continuum that are suffering. But why are they suffering? It wasn't the drugs and the alcohol in the first place that made them suffer. That was the coping skill. The suffering came from something much deeper, something much profound. and something that has gone unaddressed. It's been unspoken. It's been hiding beneath the surface, and so we've been quick to point out the symptom and the medicine, which is what drugs have always been. You look historically in our apothecaries, which are now our pharmacists. Poisons and different medicines, different herbs, have been used for tens of thousands of years, and we've known this. And so, we've gotten a little more refined in our knowledge, but we've always known this. And so I find it difficult to say that we would blame the medicine or the symptom to be the illness when I feel like it's not. We've missed the mark. We've overlooked, and to the convenience of the people that have the most, who we would probably most likely ask for to help us deal with this, right? Because they don't want to give up that money. So it's in their interest that it gets swept under the rug. So we continue to get turned on each other. And right now is a time when, I'm going to be going to Harvest Fest, and I'm going to be telling people that it's time for us to stop dividing ourselves by our substances, whatever those are. Whether you chose to use alcohol, cocaine, crack, heroin, crystal meth, MDMA, I go down a whole list, whatever it is, right? We've been broken down into groups in recovery by our substances. We've been broken down into groups in communities of use by our substances, and the time has come for us to join forces and to put aside our historical differences and to work together on the real human rights that are at the core of a lot of the illness, and for us to work at a larger scale and at a societal level to be able to bring about the necessary change to actually treat the condition, uh, by properly diagnosing it and addressing it at the proper systems level. And right now, we're simply and almost solely addressing it at the micro level. It's actually eerily similar to the inadequacy of our systems analysis of homeless service. Again, very well intentioned, but it's a misguided intervention when we're dealing with massive systems failures that have caused serious tragedy to befall upon not just dozens or hundreds, but we're talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, you know, millions of Americans. And those numbers are staggering. And when you pair that with the knowledge, and this is based on a study that was done on homeless individuals living around LA County within the last 10 years, so it's a current study, that the average age of death, so the living conditions of the average homeless person, are worse than that, so they died younger consistently than those of any third world country on the planet. And that's what we've created here in this society. We've created an underbelly of such incredible pain and suffering, and then we want to turn to blame people for using drugs. And I think that we've completely allowed ourselves to be deceived and to have another scapegoat pushed our way, and an undeserving scapegoat at that. Certainly it's becoming more widely acknowledged that cannabis patients should no longer be that scapegoat. And now they've turned on a new community. All of a sudden, there's a new drug crisis. So I grew up in Willimantic, Connecticut. People were dying from heroin in the 80s and 90s when I was a kid. The only difference was they were Hispanics and they didn't speak English, and they never made the front page of the newspaper. And that's it. I mean, this isn't new. This is something that's been manufactured, it's been created. And as we start to talk about the solutions, recovery being one of the only recognizable solutions that we need to talk about, what is the next evolution? Because what we have done so far, we've made steps in the right direction. We've made a bunch of missteps along the way. So we've got two major tasks in front of us as a recovery community. One is correcting the misinformation and the missteps, and really ironing out like what is our knowledge base and what are the accepted facts and what are the myths, and dispelling a lot of the misinformation, and then starting to create a blueprint of what the next phase of recovery looks like. And I think, when we start talking about integrating community, integrating family, when we start to address it, the different levels, the different issues that have arisen, there's certainly a significant component of family vulnerability, and there's a lot of work and research to be done there to really understand addiction as a family condition, but to also look at the larger picture of what now, almost a century of misinformation, harmful slandering, police violence, criminal justice entanglement, deepened in poverty, children being deprived of parents, homes being broken apart, children being sent off to the state. Um, all of these things are incredibly traumatic. So we've compounded a narrative of trauma on top of the trauma that initiated the problem. So instead of handling this sensibly, like like civilized people would, and to talk about the problem and to try to figure out what it was, we just tried to make it go away, and we tried to do it as quickly and easily as we could. And when I say we, I'm talking about the American community that makes all of our decisions, a privileged American community. But at the same time, it's also we, as in the voters, as in the people that go to the polls and exercise our right. And for many of the folks who are affected by the war on drugs, they don't have these rights. And so there are some fundamental flaws in the process that preserve the status quo and perpetuate these harms against our community. Um, so I hope you guys were able to gain a little bit of insight from what I've shared with you this week. I've kind of been all over the map, but I hope this gives you a little more well-rounded sense of my understanding of recovery. Next week, I want to really get back to basics and talk about what is the definition of recovery, what is recovery. I'd love to preface a little bit of harm reduction for you folks and talk about, what is harm reduction, what is harm reduction in terms of programming, what is harm reduction in terms of philosophy, what are the commonly accepted um, forms of harm reduction, then what are other forms of harm reduction that we don't traditionally discuss as forms of harm reduction, and one of those is actually the use of medical cannabis as a harm reduction strategy for long-term chronic pain management. And so that very neatly segues into what we get together to talk about every week. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and hopefully I'll see more of you next week. And please feel free to go on our Facebook page or join our group and leave me something in the comments, ask any questions, and I'm happy to raise them every week. I'm happy to do research when I have opportunity, and try to bring you guys the best answers that I can. All right, so thank you so much for your time, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you.